I would like now to open the discussion to the audience, and I would like to say that we have people online, and you can send your questions, and I have somebody, well, Philippe will pass them on. So maybe we could start with an online question, Philippe, and then people, you can just jump in. Oh, I see. Somebody that you know. A man called Grant Martin.
Yes.
Hello, Grant. Green Beret. So listening in from Korea, my Katusas, I listen with interest to the cheese and wine and helping generals to go on their journeys. There are few generals I can think of that I wish they would go on a journey. Ha ha ha. On the question of good design, I would say that I think Deborah Stone's point in Policy Paradox notes that politics is about a journey. Speaking of journeys, I think design, when it is good, acknowledges consciously that things aren't done in isolation. The American Army, I think, thinks many times in isolation. So that was from Grant Martin. Thank you very much. So I think I will take the first question over here. If you want to name yourself and then ask the question.
Yeah. I can't stand up.
Yeah, don't.
No worries.
Thank you. And this will seem almost like that previous question was planted, in fact, because it is exactly that same direction I was taking. Grant Martin just introduced that, in fact. Let me just maybe twofold. First, a comment, and thank you for your presentation, by the way. Thank you for that. My name is Francis Clermont, teacher at the Royal Military College in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. Twofold. The first is a comment. The second is a question. And I'd like you to leave you with that comment and question. First, I'd propose that a simple definition of design that can maybe gather everyone here is design is philosophy of action as a basis for all of that. And going back to what Herbert Simon defined design as, is to demise courses of action to change existing situations into preferred ones. Now, having said that, we've said nothing and everything, because the following question that is the most important, I think, touches upon the question of preferred ones. Preferred for whom, and is a judgment call and a value call. And that's where key questions and comments and design is all about. Excuse me, that was on 2 pages. The exercise of design with the help of systems thinking and critical thinking entails reflective thinking and practice. Now my question to especially the 2 generals. As strategic leaders, are you able to reflect to the point where you're able to identify your own organization as a key factor with the problem you wish to solve? A bit like the pyromaniac firefighter sometimes. Thank you.
I got that metaphor.
Well, I'll go back to Senge's 5th discipline. One of the key indicators of a lack of systems thinking is always arguing that the problem is out there. And the first question I ask my team is, what is our role in this? And if I use a tactical example, working an aviation group into a SOF organization as we were transforming, achieving a deeper level of integration of our aviation with our SOF assets. My team was very frustrated as we were mixing that Air Force, SOF, and in some cases Army cultures. There was a bit of us and them sort of frustration. And as we were preparing to go out on a deployment, I consistently got from my team, yeah, they're not treating us like one of them. We're not treating them like one of them. And we had a training event. They show up at the SOF building, and they can't get in to do the training. The commissioner at the gate says, "Sorry, you're not on my list." Of course, all of the longer-term SOF personnel walk right through because they're on the list. I come back and I ask my team, "How's the training going?" They're saying, like we said, they're not embracing us, not treating us like one of them, couldn't get in. And I asked my operations officer, "Did we give them the list of our people?" "Oh crap, I forgot that." So it's us. We were the problem. And it's just a reminder of when we're looking at problems, I see it every day. This organization didn't do this. They're screwing us. Why isn't this happening? Often, almost always, we have a role in the problem.
I would come back from two different perspectives. One is individual, and self-reflection is very much related to leadership. And I sort of agree with what you say, that the higher up on the food chain, the less time you have the luxury of just leaning back and actually getting on the balcony and looking at things as they are, or just hearing a 360 sort of evaluation in the military is still very rare. But that's just a leadership issue, and that can be developed. So I think it's entirely possible. The other thing is, and I'm advocating for a light command transformation again, is if someone is consciously creating, like NATO created the architecture, specific organizations with the purpose of discovering problems and reframing problems and asking those questions of why, then you have the luxury to do that because that's your purpose. That's in your job description. That's in the job description of many people at ACT. So it's an institutional, organizational thing as well, that you can create an environment when you actually have time to do that.
All right, maybe you can take one question.
Hi, it's Glenn Milne here. I have been a professor of architecture for 40 or 50 years or something. And along the way, I've designed everything from Pierre Trudeau's election platform to a line of furniture to presentations here, etc. So before I pass away this evening, I would like to pass on a few observations. Part of the context that we're working in is a pretty much design-blind culture. So the people who are coming to you are completely different than Finns or Italians. The largest faculty at the University of Milan is architecture. Very few go into designing buildings. Many go into designing software. They spread throughout the culture. In Finland, education is not about learning, it's about making. So the kids from the age of 6 on are designing songs, compositions, projects for geography, projects for mathematics, etc. That's the competition, and that's the context. And I think as long as I'm not coming to a quick conclusion, but as long as we're blind to the fact that we have a culture that doesn't support real design, we have a culture that supports good philosophic discussion about design. If you want design in the military, and I've worked for a prime minister for 4 years, and I've worked with every department that I can think of in the federal government designing their policy or their strategy or whatever, then you're going to have to take a whole of government approach. Because PMO, PCO, an innovation hub in PCO is definitely something you have to link with, because you're the military and you are the instrument of the Prime Minister's instincts. A couple of ideas about getting on with educating military people in design, please. Is there anything wrong? Sorry, you want me to shut up?
No, but
Is there anything wrong with asking, there are many people in this room with many degrees. Go and take a 3-year Bachelor of Design at Carleton, where I used to, which I founded. That's only 3 years, and it will add to your roster of degrees, and you will have a good, strong design capability built in from basic design on up, which is about basic principles of design. Because folks, I'm fighting this little devil on this shoulder that's saying, you are talking about design and you don't know or practice design. And I think that's a huge hole in what's going on here. And would there be anything wrong with setting up a school of military design? I set up a school of architecture design. Could first year be basic design, the way we have it in our industrial design and architecture, et cetera, where the principles of design are taught through abstract compositional projects, and that as you go up through the years, you're designing operational structures, you're designing mission structures, you're designing equipment, you're designing procurement systems, you're designing campaign options, et cetera. I can imagine that school being formed. And given the scope of your work, which is more considerable than the scope of work available to architects anymore, I think you should really seriously think about starting a school of military design, which is not devoted to philosophy, but devoted to turning out people who can design all the things military. I'll curtsy now. Thank you.
If I could start on that. So that's one of the key arguments right now, I think, in how should, or in this, sorry to bring the cheese thing back up again, but so architectural design is a form of design. However, I would offer, just in my practice, that doing exclusively one type of design or following one school, one discipline, opens up the dangers that I think that some of the design founders, particularly what Nave was attempting to do, it elicits that if you're not doing, one of the terms we use is transdisciplinary, where we're able to move into various ways of doing design, particularly postmodernism. There are some examples of postmodern architectural design, Victor Papanek being one of them in the 70s, of course, but he was actually ostracized by a lot of his profession and not taken seriously in many ways. Not like the way Simon's book, The Science of the Artificial, and many other the more popular mainstream designers were. But that's only just within that discipline. So now if we go outside of that discipline into others, so you've got, well, essentially, my opinion of postmodernists, their contributions are just as amazing as their detriments. I mean, they're attacking each other many times, but their contributions to military applications are phenomenal if done in a multi-design approach. Or we need to understand and taste many cheeses. I did it again. And part of this is that I'll give you a quick anecdote. When I was in Afghanistan, I saw many examples of design done in a systemic, architectural, sound, scientific, school-based, effective way. And it catastrophically failed for the very reasons that the military wasn't really willing to accept. Case in point, we were building beautiful barracks for the Afghan soldiers, and the Afghans were destroying them, not because they wanted to, but because we were building them incorrectly, because we were building them based upon Western standards and Western models, because it was a cultural disconnect. And not realizing we were building wells and schools where they weren't supposed to be, not because of what we were trying to do, but because of what that culture was saying to us, which counteracted many of the beliefs that we have, not in an architectural sense, but in a societal and a social context that's both irrational and subjective. The very things that we have a very hard time with measuring or applying analytical processes to. The military faces a unique context that I would offer is quite different from most any other profession. The essence of war and conflict combines the rational, of which we have so many design disciplines that work, as well as planning processes. But then there's the irrational. And we work very hard in our planning processes to marginalize and eliminate this, but it still nonetheless corrupts and corrodes everything. And so what design does in a military sense, I think more effectively than many other approaches, and in a blended way, is trying to confront the rational with the irrational, the subjective with the objective, using the precision of the architect with the understanding of the social engineer, but also the local community activist, and the radical cleric, and the politician, and the philosopher, and getting them all in the room and not converging them all to get a mess, but to elicit the right stakeholder combinations to elicit a useful solution that doesn't optimize, but achieve something that's an advantage to us that's enduring and adaptive.
From the organizational perspective, I just have a practical sort of question is yes, we have this school. So who we are sending, and I'm picking on the Marines back there. Sorry, the U.S. system I know a little bit better than the Canadian one. So do you have a design MOS in the forces?
We have a planner MOS.
Okay, so we're getting there. But so as Ben has said, you know, it's catching up with the military slower, but it does. And just last week, I'm not sure if you're aware, but part of the third offset strategy, which is supposed to help DoD, US DoD innovate, is a defense innovation board. So these are all people who are not military experts. It's led by Eric Schmidt, the ex-Google exec. And last week they had a meeting, the regular quarterly meeting, and one of the suggestions, and they are making these suggestions to the Secretary of Defense, was actually to create an innovation MOS within the forces as soon as possible. And that's just a practical thing that would help actually facilitate design education, because then you can pinpoint people who want to take that sort of task upon themselves, and then you can invest in them with education and all kinds of other things.
Yeah, creating designers as a military occupational specialty in a bureaucracy that's huge, and also, you know, we always think of our 4 stars as being top level. You know, when you look at the whole government, they're probably upper middle. You know, how much power do they have? How much authority do they have? They get authority from laws. They get authority from regulations, instructions. I think of the Office of Personnel Management. No one ever talks about the Office of Personnel Management in the U.S. government, but they're one of the most powerful institutions in government, because I'm a logistician by trade. There are 56,000 civilian logisticians in the United States Army, and they're all governed by the Office of Personnel Management. Okay, so to think that, and I go back to your point about, you know, using architectural metaphor for military. The military doesn't have a distinct science. It's not a unitary science. It is a conglomeration of almost everything. I mean, they have the medical profession embedded, they have the legal profession embedded, they have just about all the professions. Engineers, you know, a lot of engineers, social scientists. I mean, it is a blend. I won't say it's a purposeful blending, but it's a blend of, I would say, hundreds of disciplines. So to think that we can design our way as a unified kind of approach.
You made that implication. I didn't. The design is creeping through every discipline.
And I would argue that it's been in engineering forever. I mean, the F-35 is hell of a design. I mean, let's face it, it's the most advanced design out there. It's advanced technology, right? I mean, we're good at it. We're good at it. But we tend to think of our organizations as engineering problems too. When we use tasks, and we take the individual tasks and we make them into collective tasks, and we make them into corps level or you know, Marine Expeditionary Force level. Then we take them up to the Army level and theaters, and all these tasks are supposed to add up to victory. So we engineer our way to, and we design our forces around this idea of task, additive approach to task management. It's very Frederick Taylor in terms of how we design our forces. To break that mold, you know, it's such a huge bureaucracy. It's such a huge organization. I just think that's a tremendous transformation, and I think it's going to take something really bad to make that happen.
Before taking the next question, I just want to read a comment. Grant Martin from South Korea again. He wanted to jump in again, and he says, "A military design school should be transdisciplinary. I love the idea that we don't have a culture of doing design only talking philosophically about it." That was the comment.
Yes.
Matt Pivot, Major Matt Pivot. I'm the Deputy Commanding Officer here at the Mapping and Charting Establishment in Ottawa. My question has nothing to do with maps, I assure you. My question, I think, is right in context, but something that hasn't been discussed, which for me is a big elephant in the room, which is the age difference. If you look around demographics, just here, the community of design and who writes, and by the way, I wrote all your stuff, and I think half of you are geniuses, you rewired my brain. But where's the room for the young people? I think we got the same dilemma we have often in society where old people look at the young guys, yeah, but they don't know, they're not mature enough, they haven't seen it, how can they do design? And you got the young guys, which I think I am close to, a bunch of us, who are just begging for a chance to make an effect, and it's hard. Have you thought about solutions for that? Things like mentorship. U.S. Army is phenomenal on mentorship. And in fact, I would argue that that mentorship is going on in the U.S. Army is percolating very well in Canada. Have you thought of these options? Do you think this is potentially a solution to grow design from inside by just having students of it who are actual practitioners? Thank you.
I would say, shortly I would say, again, I think we already established that you can teach design or learn design at any age. And my grandfather was a painter, and he said, well, at the age of 4, they tell you that when you paint, the sky has to be blue, and the grass has to be green, and the house has to have some kind of shape, and then they destroy the intuitive designers that all of us are at an early age, okay? So we can teach design or learn design at any age. That's not the question. In our design inquiries and what we do in the general's course, design inquiries are meant to do 2 things: to produce strategies and to translate them or implement them in operations. Now that's relevant to a certain, very certain specific group in the military or group in other institutions, other practices, other institutions of practice, okay? So it's not a question of confusion, it's not a question of age difference. It's a question of what is the design inquiry supposed to produce at the end? And then that would say what kind of people you will deal with, okay? So that's the question to an answer. But I will take the opportunity to also say, when we think of institutionalizing design, I would say, don't hurry in taming the beast. It needs to remain the beast. It needs to remain uninstitutionalized, because once you institutionalize design, you will kill it.
No, just I also believe that reverse mentoring is very important, and that you don't see many 20-year-old generals. It's just the way military is built up. But it doesn't mean that you don't surround yourself with those people. At a very young age, as a captain, I ended up working with a deputy state secretary at the Ministry of Defense who consciously surrounded himself with a few young captains. And I didn't understand it at that time, but we just had a chat recently, and that was very conscious on his part. And it wasn't called reverse mentoring at that time, but in a way that's what he was doing.
If I could piggyback on that, so there's a debate in militaries right now on how to use these essentially think tanks that are really only available at corps level, division level, and higher, because there's just enough people on the staff. American militaries tend to use CAG or SIG, so that's Commander's Action Group or a Strategic Initiatives Group, and they're filled with a small group of SAMS graduates, Functional Area 59 strategists, Department of State representatives, very, very unique people that are young, but they provide that senior leader with lots of options, lots of ideas, lots of different projects. However, having served on one of those organizations, they can be abused as well. And so the leader, the senior leader, has to be the change agent, to use one of Carl Weick's great terms. And that agent of change has to recognize what they are doing in their organization and how they're using it. I have seen a CAG used very effectively, and I've seen a CAG used as a pseudo inner staff that dismantled and disenfranchised the rest of the main staff and created significant tensions and added more bureaucracy. And that's an example of it not working. But that's reflective of that leader's style and their role as an agent of change or an agent potentially of non-change. In the future, if the military wants designers to truly address these deeply complex challenges, and we all agree that we have to be multidisciplinary and know what the heck we're talking about when we address architectural design or the Stanford-based models, human-centric design, SOD, Army design methodology and the differences between them and why they matter and how they relate to the organization. Well, gosh, that's a heck of a lot of stuff to do. How do you do that? You're not going to get it in a 5-day course. You're not going to get it in a weekend with a general, no matter how good they are. How are you going to get it? Well, how does the military create pilots, special forces, surgeons, and lawyers? Do you have anybody represent you as a lawyer? Or let me give you a better example. Would you go under the knife and right before you get put under, the doctor says, hey, I'm actually not a full doctor. I haven't gone to a 4-year school, but I did go to a couple of 5-day courses, and my commander needs me to do this. No. Yet we do that. Even the functional area 59s have a 12-week, I believe, course that they go through. ORSA, Dr. Paparone knows this very well. How long is the course?
It is 14 weeks.
14 weeks, intense study.
Yeah.
The SAMS graduates and other advanced schools, it's a year long. So we're able to invest a significant amount of time and education and experience into some fields, but what is being done for design right now? I would offer that it's still too young and immature, but it has to be changed soon. So how is it going to be changed and who's going to do the changing? Whoever probably innovates first is going to be the game changer. And it's going to be any country or any organization that does it first effectively. The race is on.
All right, so I think I will take, well, the last 3 questions now in a row, and then I will give you the opportunity to make a last comment and conclude, because time flies, and we'll have to conclude that discussion right after. So, yeah, please.
Thank you. So, a bit over an hour ago now, Philippe asked the panel a question about what was the right point in a career to commence design education. And listening to the 5 of you together gave me an idea, and I want to put that idea to you and see what your comments on it may be. And the answer that you all gave when you were talking about either your own experiences with design or potentially teaching it was that no matter what level the students are at in terms of career progression, E1 through E10, O1 through O10, star rank, etc., you'll get people who are ready and people who are not. So perhaps an alternative approach to educating in this area may be the development of a means of selection of people who are intrinsically ready, as opposed to having it extrinsically imposed on them by a career management system. And that your design course wouldn't need to be tied to a rank or a level in any way, shape or form, providing you could identify people who are ready to self-select into it. And so my question to the committee is, notwithstanding that there'd be some big institutional challenges in implementing that, as an idea or a concept, do you think it has any merit? Forgive the closed question.
We will take the 3 questions since we have very little time. Yeah.
One quick comment on Jacko. So I'll just throw out here. One indicator of people in the military that have a tendency towards disruptive thinking and probably are appealing towards design are some of the people that we eliminate very quickly, which is an irony.
My name is Philippe Dufort with Global Affairs Canada. How has design informed how you view what winning a war means?
I have one comment and then a question. My comment is just going back when we had the discussion about different types of design, not really cheese, but when we talked about architectural design, I think one of the differences might be sometimes with design activities that we do militarily, if we're an architect, we would have to accept the fact that every time we touch the concrete, the molecular composition of it might change, but we're not sure, so we have to check. And every time we check, it might change, but we're not sure, because we're actually in a complex adaptive system that keeps changing on everything that we do. So that's just an observation that I've had, and I think that's part of what makes it very difficult. And then my question is, as we've kind of advocated for different varieties of cheese here this evening, have we put some thought into how we might figure out how the next 4-year-old whose painting doesn't have blue sky imposed upon it. And if we did that, in 50, 100, 1,000 years, have we solved these challenges because we've fixed the things that suppress our innate human desire to learn and create?
All right. Thank you very much. So I have to conclude here with the question. So maybe I will start with Chris and we'll go this way so you can react to the question, but also state a concluding remark in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Well, real quick on the Jacko, your question on talent management, so to speak. If you create more specialties, you run a danger. We're already finding that out in the Army, where we had the strategists, we have the operations researchers, we have these very specialized functional areas that are non-command track, but they, I tend to think they don't work very well, because strategists aren't really strategists. They might work for a 2 or 3 star general, but they're not strategists. So, I don't think they really do strategy from a national, maybe holistic way. I know they're trained or educated to think that way, but how much influence do they really have as a major or lieutenant colonel? So I don't think the functional area, the more you differentiate in your ranks, the more integration problems you have. And this person you're relying on now to influence across all of the other functions, right? That's what their job is, right? They're supposed to be, the Army, and I'll just take 30 seconds. The U.S. Army had a program called Organizational Effectiveness. Some in the room, you're laughing. And it was a way to, in a way it was designing how the commanders would deal with their own organizations. It dealt with taking surveys, feedback to the commander, and then he would improve the effectiveness of their organization. They sent people to a special school in Monterey. It was Monterey. It was Fort Ord, California, and they really created a bunch of internal consultants for the Army. It died. It died when it was really Airland Battle was born, and they said we're not going to spend that money there anymore. We're going to build these things called training centers, national training centers, right? So TRADOC said, no more of that, we're going to do this, because that's what we do, we go out and fight. So I have a tendency to believe that these functional specialties don't work very well.
Well, two short reactions. One to Aaron. I think we're at the point where we'll have to accept that there could be great tacticians who are going to be lousy generals or lousy general officers, and vice versa. There could be lousy tacticians who could be awesome generals, awesome designers. Okay, so yes, I agree with Ben. We need to find a way not to have them both, but yes, to accept the two options. And I think the general's course or design inquiries are very good in showing us what type of people we're dealing with. And to you, I would say, well, you threw a nasty remark towards the end of the session. But a short answer would be that for us, war, in the sense of like the big war, is a failure of strategy. So if we do design, we're not supposed to get to the point of this, escalation of violence that is usually out of control for both sides. I mean, definitely in the Israeli case, most of the conflicts we found ourselves in the last 1 year are those that two sides didn't want them to get to the point of a full-scale war. So do good design, or do design, and don't get to a full-scale war.
So I'm going to answer question 1 and 2, but I'm going to throw a story in between, which has been triggered by Monterey, California, and I'll try to stick to the 2 minutes, being military and discipline. So number one, I come from a soft angle again, and it was a great idea, building the schoolhouse, but I can relate back to soft selection. So when we start soft selection, we just don't know who's going to pull through. I mean, we can make bets, but at the end of the day, it's designed in a specific way to select certain individuals. Where if you could design a sort of a selection course for designers as well, who we are investing a lot more later on. Maybe that can help. Just throwing it out there. So the story. Who have heard about Cobuncino? Yeah, I didn't think so. So I'm in Monterey, Ansala Institute, which used to be a hippie place. Now it's a resort kind of thing. You can go for a retreat. And this person is a master of Kyudo, of Japanese archery, and really a master of it. And if you have seen the motions that they go through, you know, actually it's an art form. So he is doing a presentation there, and they are putting up an archery target on the knoll just by the Pacific Ocean. And so he goes through the motions, it's flawless, it's beautiful, and then he releases the arrow, and it goes way past the target and plunges into the ocean. And everyone is silent. And the master says, "Bullseye!" So the moral of the story is that, you know, genius can see what others cannot. And you might not have heard of Cobuncino, but you might have heard of another person who has passed away since, called Steve Jobs. So he was the Buddhist master for Steve Jobs. So when he's pulling out a laptop from an envelope, that's nowhere, you know where it's coming from. So this is the story that was triggered. The signing off. Yes, we need to ask why. Why are we doing design? And I honestly believe that the reason why we're doing this is to enable the warfighter. And I've said this before, innovation is not about technology. Innovation is about pushing the technology down to the warfighter faster than the enemy, getting into the OODA loop, and just this way win the war. So if I had to answer the why, then it's really enabling. It's building capacity and enabling the warfighter.
I think maybe I'll argue, listening to some of the comments, I'll argue against some of my previous comments a little bit. At what point should we be introducing design? You know, if I think earlier on in my career, I wish I would have had it earlier, certainly earlier than I received it in my case. But when you think back earlier, I've had to learn more than a half a dozen types of aircraft. As an Army aviator, I had to know all the Air Force, do all the Air Force professional development. I had to do, by de facto, all the Army professional development. And then you get into operational planning, then you get into strategic planning, then you get into our national security program, then you get into a whole of government integration, and. So there's a point where, you know, there's only so many hours in a day. How low can you go? Where's the sweet spot to start introducing that? So I guess I'll still say earlier, but we need to apply some judgment about how early we do that. And to the comment about picking those people that show an aptitude for innovation, it's written right on our officer evaluations every year. Leading change, innovation, creativity. We should be doing that already. Maybe we just need to apply the design piece into that of, you know, creative design innovation.
I'm all wired up.
All right.
All right, so I guess I'll finish up. I'll be under 2 minutes, I promise. But more metaphors. So just to kind of cover both of those points, let's talk about how important it is to use multiple disciplines and draw from the strengths of them. So 2 quotes. I believe it was Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, who said that doctors can bury their mistakes, but architects have to grow bushes. All right? Another quote by French postmodern philosopher Michel Foucault deals with problematizers. And what is a problematizer? Well, I believe that a military design practitioner not only has to bury bodies when they make mistakes, but they also have to plant bushes. Right? They have both of those challenges of the architect and the doctor, but they have one more. Right? Frankenstein is a mad scientist, right? But why is he a mad scientist in the story? He's mad because he created a monster, not called Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein's monster, but it's one of those things everyone screws up. But he was trying to produce eternal life. He was trying to shatter the bonds of the normal cycles. He was trying to use new technology to bring what societies have all wanted. Everyone wants the fountain of youth. if Frankenstein had been successful, hypothetically, you would not have had a horror story. You would have had a designer who had radically altered everything and brought about a new way of life. Now, of course, that's not what happened. And Frankenstein inadvertently created a monster, in part because of his ego, in part because of he was immature and dealing with things and all those other elements that are into that work, which is why it's a great story. And Frankenstein's monster runs through the village and creates havoc and eventually destroys Frankenstein himself, destroys his empire, his castle, and his reputation and everything. We as military designers have to bury bodies and grow bushes. And we also have to recognize there are consequences to when we do design. There are no do-overs. There's just design consequences. You may be striving when your commander says they need the cure, this amazing new thing that's going to shatter everything. They want everlasting life. And you're going to create it in the lab using all these new things that go against what the profession says, so they'll call you mad. And if you're successful, well, that's the easy part. What happens when you fail and your design monster is running through the village causing havoc? That is a consequence you also have to deal with. But at the same time, the change agents that are our general officers, that are our senior leaders today and in the next generation, have to acknowledge the dangers of disruptive design. They have to know about the buried bodies and recognize the bushes. Be wary of the monsters, but still allow those laboratories, those studios, to exist and put in the right controls and conditions, amplification and dampening, so that you don't create monsters, but you do create the potential for these amazing, earth-shattering, disruptive, transformative processes. Without the fear of the monster, you will not get that transformation. You'll just be creating the same old stuff. It has to be revolutionary, and it's also going to be dangerous. We have to be aware of it.
All right, thank you very much. I think this is an interesting comment to conclude this discussion, because I noted that a blind spot very often in our discussions are the dangers of design. We talk about the potential, we talk about the future, and the potentialities in the future, but the dangers are design, I think, should be part of our discussion in the future. But luckily, the discussion is not over. We have been discussing for a few years, and here we are only on the second day of the conference, and we'll continue to exchange tomorrow. But I think it was a brilliant conversation we had here. It was stimulating, and it will feed the activities we have tomorrow. So I will ask the audience, please, to join me in thanking the conferencer and the audience. Thank you very much to all.